think we spent $30,000 or $40,000 making these copies. I asked for relief from that, and y'all fought it. So my suggestion, subject to the court, would be we'll admit them the appropriate break or lunch hour. If the court wants to clear us out, we can certainly move them to wherever we need to.
My position on that, Sure. I think we should admit the documents that would be used in evidence to say, I'm not going to admit this entire thing.
It's our right to do it.
And never refer to, I don't know how
It's class.
35 boxes and documents.
We'll see how it goes. We've got a long trial ahead of us. I have a feeling that at some point it'll be so much you will ask for us to stop.
If you get cumulative, I will. But
It will be cumulative.
Appeals, the Supreme Court record if we're not letting these documents, we're not admitting the evidence, it's ludicrous to do so. We would have to go through these documents without all of the objections we have. Every individual, each individual document, preserve them. As a ridiculous exercise for something that will probably put forward.
How many times did they say no?
Just for clarity of the record, it was never brought to my attention that there was any intent to print out the entirety of the columns. The only discussions on the issue on it was trying to do, so you know what was said. It was in the context of an argument of how to handle exhibits at trial. And I think you suggested that all exhibits be referenced electronically and that you had the party bring documents to trial to share with the court, to share with the parties. We objected to that and asked that if the document was used for the witness, that the paper copy be provided to counsel. That was the context of the argument, the totality of what the argument was never brought to our attention, that they would make a poor judgment decision to print out 35 boxes of materials that will never see the light of day to witness on the stand. So I just want to make sure the record is clear on that, Your Honor. It was never brought to our attention. It was an error in judging on their part.
Your Honor, the number of times that they came into Oklahoma, the total number of what's in these boxes is relevant. And that's why we're going to offer it through this witness. They can say it's ludicrous. I think it's ludicrous to send sales reps into Oklahoma to sell narcotics 135,000 times.
Remember that we're here from us.
Also, just for the record, Your Honor, I think Mr. Payton made a point. If they wanted to ask Ms. Dean Hesselman, how many sales calls did Janssen represent related on doctors related to these products? The number is 135,000. She can say 135,000. It will be in the record coming from the corporate representative. The evidence is, and the evidence is in the record without what we
Your Honor, may it please the court. Good morning, Ms. Dean Messerman. How are you?
Good morning. I'm
Hope
well.
you had a good
How are
night
you?
last night.
I did. Thank you. How about you?
I did. I got to go. My parents are here, and we sat in the rocking chairs over at the Montford Inn last night for a little while. Nice night. So now we're back here. The
Can
last,
we have a question and answer as opposed to a speech about, yes, thank you.
she asked me, so I was being polite. Thank you for asking. If we can go back to State's Exhibit 1048 was the last document we were on last night. Mike, if you could publish this. We were looking at the market share of Noramco that was stated for the 3 years, June of 2013, 2014, and 2015. And we looked at that, and you'll see there, just to refresh your memory, what does it say for oxycodone in the year 2015, the last one? May I approach, Your Honor?
Yes, you may.
We'll just do it this way. So this tall graph right here on the far right of the oxycodone column, there's a number. What is that?
65%?
And then if we go next to it on hydrocodone, what number is that?
54%?
And for both oxycodone and hydrocodone, Noramco lists a number for where it stands in the market domestically. What number is attached to each of those?
Are you referring to the number one on top of that?
Yes, ma'am.
chart?
You see that?
I do.
Okay. Now, you were here for opening statements in this case.
I was.
Mike, can you show me this? So we took your market share there and just made it in color because it was a little hard to see, but this is the same graphs for hydrocodone and oxycodone that you see, right?
It appears to be yes.
Okay, now do you remember, do you remember an opening statement, there was a graph that showed hydrocodone and oxycodone? What we didn't see there was if you took the percentage of market share that Noramco had in the year 2013, it looks a little different when we put those up on that graph, doesn't it?
Well, I think that the other graph was referring to the API.
Yes, ma'am. Your opening statement was trying to show that there were state-paid prescriptions during that year that were so large and that Johnson & Johnson and Janssen had nothing to do with it, right? That was the intent?
I think the intent was that the end product of hydrocodone and oxycodone had a significant volume of prescriptions.
And if we overlay the
Hold on.
Pro-
If you would mind making sure that microphone is okay if it's facing that way, but just have that microphone in front of you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Sorry.
Now, because that was a little hard to hear, I think what you said was the intent of the slide used in opening statement was to show that the end product was what the state paid for hydrocodone and oxycodone. That's what you said?
I believe that's what it meant, yes.
Now, when we overlay that with the active pharmaceutical ingredient that Noramco made, that graph looks quite different, doesn't it?
In what respect?
Well, if we look at hydrocodone and you color it with 65%, which is what your market share was for oxy. Let's go to oxycodone. If you go to oxycodone on the right and you color up about 65% or 64% of that stack, which would represent your market share for oxycodone, then that graph looks a little different than what was shown to the court during opening statement, doesn't it?
Again, I would repeat that I believe what the Noramco slide was showing was the API, the percentage of API that was made for oxycodone and hydrocodone.
That's right, and oxycodone is API. Oxycontin is a brand name.
Correct.
And so when we look at API for oxycodone during 2013 in state-paid prescriptions, it looks different, doesn't it?
I don't understand what you're saying, how it looks different. It's
Well,
colored.
It's colored, right? So
Yes.
that orange, that would represent how much of the market your company had for oxycodone that was supplied in this country to drug companies, right?
Excuse me, Your Honor, again, your company. If you would just specify the company for the purposes of the record.
Sure. Naramco, a subsidiary owned by Janssen, owned by Johnson & Johnson, a company for families. Are we
Point out
clear?
For the purpose of the record, not a defendant in this case.
Johnson & Johnson's not a defendant? Ma'am, is Johnson & Johnson a defendant in this case?
Ramco, Brad.
Is Johnson & Johnson a defendant in this case?
Yes,
Does Johnson & Johnson own Naramco prior to the time they sold it?
yes.
Okay, and you get the point here. If we look at oxycodone as a percentage of what you own in the market, it's a lot, right?
Again, I would go back to Naramco supplied the API, the ingredient, but market share-wise, I think your market share of the API market, yes.
Okay, thank you very much. And let's look at hydrocodone. Same principle there. When you add on what the market share was for hydrocodone, it's more than half, right?
Again, the percentage of API that Naramco supplied, yes.
Okay, thank you very much, ma'am. Now, we talked about yesterday that supply is an important part. We saw the letter between PF Laboratories and the supply agreement between Naramco and PF Laboratories. You recall looking at that yesterday?
I do.
Okay, Your Honor, may I approach?
Yes, ma'am.
Ma'am, I'm going to hand you what states Exhibit 2373. See that? Ma'am, this is a document that was provided for us by Purdue, and under a stipulation in this case, Purdue has agreed that this is a business record that from their company. Now, it's redacted because of some confidentiality issues. I have one sentence that we'll turn your attention to at the very bottom. Your Honor, at this time, we'd offer Exhibit 2373. Do you need a copy, Your Honor?
I have it here. 2373.
Yes, sir. I'll just do that one too, just for convenience. And it's installation number 2.
Any objection by the defendants?
Absolutely. This is a Purdue document. Relevance and prejudice. We would also reassert the hearsay objection before.
Your Honor.
made.
Do you need me to make a record on that? Or?
No. Consistent with my previous ruling, I'm going to overrule the defendant's objection and that states Exhibit 2373 to the record.
Thank you, Judge.
And Judge, is it okay if I reiterate the fact that I have no knowledge, personal knowledge of Naramco
Yes.
and of these dealings?
Yes.
May I approach, Your Honor?
Yes, you may.
We'll move through this one quickly. I wore my turtle tie today because we're going to have kind of a slow and methodical day, but we're going to have to kind of work through these. So if you'll just bear with me, we've got a lot to go over. At any time I'm going too fast, please let me know. This is a letter, and I realize you haven't seen it before. We're just going to talk about one thing. But you see here at the top, it's from Michael Friedman. Michael Friedman was the CEO of Purdue. Did you know that?
No.
He also was someone who pled guilty to a federal crime when Purdue pled guilty to its federal felony. Did you know that?
I did not.
Okay. And then you see that this is to Mortimer, Raymond, and Richard Sackler. Do you see that?
I see that, yes.
Now, if we'll go down, you see it says purpose, and the first line is to report on sales results and review the projects and prospects for the balance of 1999. You see that?
I see that.
Okay, so let's just step back. Yesterday, we talked about how there was correspondence between PF Laboratories and Naramco about the need to have supply for anticipated business demand. Do you recall going over that yesterday?
I do.
And you also recall when we read the letter from Mr. Fist about Tasmanian alkaloids and its history, one of the things that he talked about was how the Norman poppy was created to help in the anticipated growth or need for supply of oxycodone. Do you recall that?
I remember that, yes.
And there was also a discussion in the letter with PF Laboratories and Naramco about how this dialogue about supply had been going on for many years. Do you recall that?
I do.
Okay, so if we look here where it says report on sales, and Mike, if you can scroll up just a little bit, we had to redact this for confidentiality purposes. This is the only point I need to make with this. Here at the bottom it says, the principal barrier to a higher sales achievement before year end is product supply. You see that?
I do.
You agree with me? That's what it says.
It says that, yes.
Thank you. So, just to kind of close this out, if you're going to make something like OxyContin, you need an active pharmaceutical ingredient like oxycodone. We've discussed and established that yesterday, correct?
As far as I know, yes.
And you know there was a dialogue that went on for many years between Purdue, PF Laboratories, and Naramco about fulfilling that supply, correct?
Based on the document that we read that, but I don't know the context of that dialogue.
And as you just saw from Purdue's perspective, the principal barrier in growth for Purdue was supply. We just read that, correct?
We did?
Okay, thank you very much. Now, ma'am, you have worked for, is it Janssen or Johnson & Johnson you consider your actual employer?
Johnson & Johnson?
And you've worked in various areas of prescription drug marketing and sales, correct?
I have, yes.
You understand that when you have a pharmaceutical product, from time to time, the company will use what's called a sales representative.
Yes.
Okay. And those are folks that you will hire and then train in a product or a product area that you anticipate selling, correct?
Correct.
So with respect to opioids, for example, you made Duragesic, an Ultram product, a tapentadol product called Nucynta, all of those, correct?
Correct.
And then you also had Tylenol with codeine, correct?
A long time ago, yes.
And you had sales representatives, at least with respect to Ultram, Duragesic, and Nucynta, correct?
Correct.
You use those in states all across the country, correct?
Sales representatives?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes.
And oftentimes those sales representatives would be folks that you just hired right out of college, right?
Rarely right out of college, but sometimes.
They were not required to be doctors.
They were not, no.
They were not required to be pharmacists.
They were not, no.
Often they had a Bachelor of Arts or Bachelor of Science degree, and that was all.
They were required to have a Bachelor of Science or Bachelor of Arts, yes.
Not to diminish those degrees, they're great. I have an English degree, which qualifies me to do not a lot, but it certainly doesn't qualify me to talk about things like prescribing drugs, does it?
Well, you would need to be trained on that.
Well, I can't prescribe drugs as an English major.
Oh, no. Not to prescribe, I'm sorry. No.
Just doctors can do that, or other folks that are licensed by a state, right?
Correct.
So you would hire these folks, bachelor's degrees often, and you would take them to Princeton, New Jersey to train them, is that right?
Well, they would do home study first, and then they would come in to the home office and train.
They would do home study at their homes.
Home study with a field learning advisor as well.
And they would then go train in New Jersey?
Correct.
When they did their home study at their homes, would they do this on a computer,
Oftentimes, yes.
via the internet?
Online training, yes.
You would agree with me, there's no geographical boundary for the internet, right? If something's being transmitted from New Jersey to Oklahoma, it's going to get into Oklahoma, right?
The Oklahoma sales representatives would be trained similarly to the other folks in other areas of the country.
And then they would get written materials as well?
Potentially, yes.
So when an Oklahoma sales rep was getting this training in Oklahoma in their home, that was here in Oklahoma, right?
Yes,
Now, do you own a home?
I do.
Do you know what we consider a home as something called real estate? Have you heard that term?
Yes,
Homes are something called property, aren't they?
yes.
So you used sales representatives, real estate, and actual physical property here in the state of Oklahoma to conduct training, didn't you?
Sales representatives would have trained in their homes.
So when they were training on how to do your sales, they weren't like levitating and hovering over the ground, were they?
No,
They were in their home, right?
potentially.
A home attached generally to the earth or to some fixture on the earth, right?
Potentially, if they did their
Often-
home study in their home, yes.
Often on the red dirt of Oklahoma, right?
Likely, yes.
On property?
Yes.
Okay. Your attorneys are chuckling about that, but it happened, didn't it?
That sales representatives trained in Oklahoma,
On property?
on Oklahoma dirt, yes.
Okay, thank you. Now, you would ultimately train these folks for how long?
Depending on the products that they had in their bags, several months.
Define several.
So they would have home study across therapeutic areas for several weeks. They would have interactions with their field sales trainer. They would go in the field with their trainer as an application type of training. Then they would go into the home office for several weeks for, again, application training. And then they would be with their district manager in the field in their specific territory that's outlined.
Did they get training from a doctor in Oklahoma?
I don't know.
Do you know if y'all ever gave them historical documents like Dr. Courtwright testified to yesterday about the history of opioids and abuse and addiction? Did y'all ever give them those things to study?
I don't know. I don't recall.
Did you ever give them his book?
I don't recall. I don't know.
Did you ever teach them about the prior opioid crisis here in America that happened after the Civil War?
Again, I don't know.
Did you ever give them any historical knowledge or documents about the historical problems we have when you oversupply opioids to man?
Again, I don't know.
Did you ever talk to them about the failed state of China that happened due to the oversupply of opium in China?
I don't know.
Did you ever have them go and talk to the University of Oklahoma Medical School about addiction and about the use of opioids?
I don't know.
Did you ever have them go get training from Oklahoma State about using opioids broadly here in the state of Oklahoma?
I don't know.
Did you ever have them go and talk to any psychiatrist about how to diagnose addiction?
I don't know.
Did you ever have them go and talk to law enforcement here in Oklahoma about what goes on in Oklahoma with historical addiction and problems with Schedule II narcotics?
I don't know.
Did you give them any training at all in the diagnosis of addiction?
I don't believe we gave them training on diagnosis.
Did you give them any medical training at all?
We gave them training on the specific drug, the pharmacology associated with the drug, the disease state itself,
Which disease state?
pain management.
We heard your attorney say the other day that that is a disease that can lead to awful things. Do you remember that?
I do.
You would agree with that?
That the disease of pain
Yes,
leads
ma'am.
to multiple things? Or pain can lead to, yes, bad things.
What about addiction? Does it lead to bad things?
Yes.
Does it lead to darkness?
I'm not a medical professional, and I've never been addicted, so I don't know as I can comment on that.
Well, you've certainly known people that have become addicted.
Not personally.
Well, you work for a company that's been named in a lawsuit about opioids and addiction, right?
Yes.
Would you agree with me that addiction's a crisis?
It is a very terrible thing, yes.
Would you agree with me that it leads to death?
It can, yes.
That it can lead to problems in a community and a home?
Yes.
It's a problem?
Yeah, you don't wish it on anyone.
Because when you have it, it lasts forever?
Yes.
It's a life-stealing, potentially life-ending problem, isn't it?
It is a problem, yes.
You were here when Dr. Rojas testified, weren't you?
I was.
And you saw that cartoon that he showed with the little bird. Do you remember that?
I do.
And did you see how it was depicted, how bright and the light in that bird's eyes turned to absolute darkness and despair? Did you see that?
I saw the cartoon, yes.
Would you agree with me that addiction is a horrible, horrible thing?
I would, yes.
What training did you give your sales reps on addiction?
I don't know the training that we gave our reps on addiction.
Can you tell the judge any specific training you gave your sales reps on how to diagnose or prevent addiction when using Schedule II narcotics for chronic pain?
I don't know, Judge, of any any training that we would have done there. We, at the time, did not have any addiction, like drugs to treat addiction. So I don't know.
But you did have drugs. Well, let's go back. You said you didn't have any drugs that treat addiction, right?
Correct.
But you did have drugs that cause addiction, right?
That had addiction potential.
And with those drugs, you took sales representatives and asked them to come and talk to doctors in Oklahoma, right?
We did, yes.
They were not chemists, your sales representatives, correct?
Some of them were, but not all.
In Oklahoma, were they chemists?
That I don't know.
If you had a sales representative working for you, calling upon doctors with Schedule II narcotics, should she know whether your company is a for-profit or not-for-profit company?
I would think so.
It would be offensive for one of your sales reps if you found out, would say that they didn't even know if your company was a for-profit company while they were selling your products here in Oklahoma. That'd be offensive, wouldn't it?
I would question why.
Well, it would shock you, wouldn't it?
I don't know if it would shock, well, maybe.
I mean, we're talking about Schedule II narcotics, right? They're really serious drugs.
They are, yes.
And you considered, or you called internally your sales reps experts, your pain experts, right?
We tried to ensure that they were, that they had a very good understanding of the market and of the drugs themselves, yes.
If someone lacks the basic understanding of whether Johnson & Johnson and Janssen are for-profit companies, do they have any business selling Schedule II narcotics to our doctors, ma'am?
I don't know as I know the context as far as this potential sales rep was probably confused, so I can't pass judgment on this intellect, so
Well,
I don't know.
If it happened, would it trouble you?
I would just simply ask or want to understand why.
Okay, we'll ask her. So we had these sales reps, and you would agree with me that when you were selling Duragesic and later Nucynta and Ultram here in the state of Oklahoma, you did use sales reps, correct?
Yes,
And what happened was you would have them do something to our doctors, and it was called target them, correct?
yes, that is a term that's used across any type of business. That's your audience.
Targets?
Yeah.
You-
Target is a word that's used across a marketing, when you're marketing any type of product, it's the audience in which you are providing the information that you are looking at.
Marketing goes to targets.
Yes,
And when you market, you spend money to make money, right?
so marketing is a broad term. And I think that maybe you use marketing as something that sounds very like dirty, and marketing isn't a dirty term. Marketing is a relationship between, and it's a process by which you determine your customers and what their needs may be. And it's a multi-step, multi-functional area that you provide information and determine what the value you're bringing to those customers.
I love conversations like these because I really enjoy hearing what you have to say. And you just said that I'm using marketing like it's a dirty term. Is that what you said?
Yeah,
You would agree with me that there's a lot of things that could be benign that can get real dirty, right?
what do you mean?
Well, I mean, I love guns. I have a bunch. There's nothing wrong with owning a gun, but they can be used for real bad things, right?
Guns can be, guns can kill, yes.
Yeah. And drugs can kill.
They can if they're used inappropriately,
Your drugs can kill.
if used inappropriately.
If supplied inappropriately, too.
Many pharmaceutical drugs, any drugs across the board, if used inappropriately,
If supplied inappropriately.
if supplied illicitly, yes,
If supplied by a doctor inappropriately.
potentially.
You would agree if we have an oversupply of Schedule II narcotic opioids, that's a problem, right?
If there's an oversupply and they are not being used appropriately, that could lead to problems.
If there's an oversupply, people can die, right?
That is the phrase that you have used.
And it's absolutely 100%, as God is my witness, true, isn't it?
Objection to the form of the question.
It's true, isn't it?
Again, I can't comment on that. I don't necessarily agree with it completely.
Your Honor, sustain my question. Let me ask it again. It is a true statement that if you oversupply Schedule II opioids, people can die.
Asked and answered, Your Honor. Same objection.
You don't quarrel with what I just said, do you?
Excuse me.
I sustain the objection.
Thank you.
Now, ma'am, you used your sales reps here in the state of Oklahoma for a decade, more than a decade, right?
Yes.
And when you targeted doctors here, the intent was to sell more of your drugs.
So the intent, and I think you and I talked a lot about this during my depositions, the intent of our sales representatives is to educate doctors around the benefits and risks associated with our products. If the doctor deems a patient appropriate for our product and writes our product, yes, that is the intent.
The intent was to influence the doctors.
So again, you and I have had multiple conversations about this, and we also talked about the intent of our sales representatives and the intent of all of the materials that we put forth in the marketplace is around education. Educate doctors. Now, if that doctor, as I said before, deems it appropriate for a patient, after understanding what the benefits and risks associated with our drugs are, and they deem that patient appropriate to prescribe our drug, and if you call that influence through that education, then I will agree with you on that.
So you wanted to educate our doctors?
Yes,
Now, our doctors have to go to medical school, right?
absolutely. They're very intelligent individuals.
Isn't it the medical school's job to educate them?
Absolutely, but many of your physicians, there's new drugs that come out all the time, and they may not have the education around specific new drugs. And they oftentimes rely on medical literature, new studies that come out, their peers, as well as our sales representatives, to bring them that education around, specifically around our drugs.
Let's deconstruct that. You just said that the doctors here in Oklahoma, although often brilliant, don't get the education they need around certain drugs, right?
Objection, that's not what she said.
Well, you can correct me. It was a long deal. Is that what you said?
So you go to school, say you graduate in 1980. A drug is released, and I'm talking medical school, you graduate, you're done. You're in practice for 10 years. A new drug comes out. You're through medical school already. So many times, there's multiple drugs that come into play, as you're going through your career. So what I said was, oftentimes doctors in medical school aren't necessarily educated on a new drug or a new entrant into the marketplace. And they rely on multiple sources to keep up on those new drugs that come into play.
Okay, let's break that down. Can you run with me on this? Can you draw something as we go? Can't? Okay. Well, I'll draw it out. I could touch it though, right? Can I do that? I'm not good enough with my touchscreen yet, darn it. I'll have it ready by tomorrow.
You can use your hands.
I'll use my hands. Tell you what, give me a piece of paper, Drew. So you just took us through a doctor starting in 1980. Is that what you said?
I did.
Okay. And Doc graduates medical school then, right?
Medical school, he's through residency. He's in practice.
Terrible handwriting. 1990, he's still practicing, so he's been out a decade, right?
Correct.
1991, new drug? Is that the year you gave or somewhere around there?
Whatever year you want to pose.
Okay. And when would you go in to educate him?
If a new drug is coming out, the drug is, out on the market, the FDA approves the drug, deems it appropriate, we would, when the drug is launched and that particular physician is in the therapeutic area, or I should say practices in that therapeutic area, you would go in and educate that clinician.
So, okay, so educate, that's your word, right?
Mhm.
By drug company.
By the sales representatives, by their peers, medical literature. They're going to get their information or try to keep up on new entrants in multiple ways, one of which is what we're talking about, one of which is the sales representative.
Okay, so let's deconstruct that a little bit. Sales representatives, you use those here in Oklahoma.
Yes,
You paid them.
we've established that, yes.
And compensation is derived based on the amount of prescriptions that get written and filled through doctors that they targeted, correct?
Through doctors that they call on, yes.
Okay. And there's no part of that compensation that's determined on whether the prescription itself was good, bad, inappropriate, or otherwise. If it's filled, it's part of the compensation formula, correct?
As long as that doctor is part of the specialty, is part of the deemed appropriate specialty.
Okay. Then you said literature, that goes into the equation of the education, right?
So yes, their peer-reviewed literature, clinical trials are published. They can review all of that material as far as their education.
And you funded literature related to studies about using opioids for chronic pain, right?
We would have funded articles around the use, yes. Clinical,
Jansen did that?
yes,
And then you said peers. Now, one of the things you would do is do CMEs and things like that, correct?
so again, CMEs, remember, are non-product related.
Okay.
They're continuing medical education. They're around usually the disease state. They are to educate the community in different issues that are taking place. But again, they're not product specific, and we as the manufacturer, as the company, would not have any role in the content development of those CME programs. As you can, across the board, CME, continuing medical education, no matter what, group has to continue their education. We may fund those because we feel it's appropriate to continue to educate in the area that we are engaged in. But again, content-wise, we're not influencing that content.
Okay. Let's go back through that. You do fund CMEs, and you did in fact fund CMEs from 1996 till 2015, fair?
Yes,
Okay. You also funded something called speaker bureaus,
speaker bureaus and programs, yes.
where you would take doctors and pay them to go out and speak about opioids, correct?
So our speaker programs were promotional in nature. So they would go through our review process. The speakers programs were branded, so they were on label, specific to the product. And so, yes, we would do those. And we would train our speakers thoroughly on the material, and again, specific to the product and the label of the product.
Okay. And you said promotional, right?
Correct.
And those happen in Oklahoma.
They did, yes.
CMEs happen in Oklahoma.
Yes, they did.
Sales reps happen in Oklahoma.
Yes.
When a CME was done on Oklahoma, it happened on property here in Oklahoma, right?
Well, CME can happen over, to your point, that what we talked about earlier, the CME can be via internet, but there were programs that took place at the state universities of Oklahoma that we provided funding for.
Oh, so when they happened at the state universities in Oklahoma, they were actually on state property.
Correct.
Okay. And if it came through a computer through the internet, that was also received on property, right?
Similar to the sales representatives, yes, that if the doctor was engaging in the CME in his home, that would have been on state property.
You also use speakers here in Oklahoma, and you would provide dinners, lunches, and the like when they would come and speak to other doctors, correct?
That would be the avenue, yes.
That would happen in Oklahoma,
Likely in the, yes.
in restaurants in Oklahoma,
Could be in the restaurants, could be in the doctor's offices.
all of which are on property.
Correct.
Okay, may I approach, Your Honor? So I'm sorry. You want to look at this first? I just what she said. You can borrow mine.
Thank you.
It may not be as strong as you need.
Probably not. No. Here you go.
Got it?
I got it.
You look good, too. Can
Thank
I have it back? Thank you.
Okay.
May I approach?
Yes.
Now, Ms. Ashland, if you'll just look at this for a second. I know I have bad handwriting, but would you just look at that? I wrote down notes of what you did, and is that a fair representation of what we discussed? And I can decipher any of that you don't understand. May I stand right here beside you and I can kind of walk you through?
Sure.
So I started in 1980, and I said medical school, graduate, and practice. You see that?
I do.
Then I drew a timeline to 1990, and in there I said practice. Do you see that?
I did.
And
I do.
around, I don't have a date, I'll add it, but 1991, I say start education, and we draw a line down the new drug, correct? You see
This-
that?
Oh, yes, you launched the new drug.
Okay, and we'll call that 1991, I'll write that in a minute, is that fair?
Sure.
Then beyond 1991, I wrote the word educate, you see that?
I see that, yes.
And I wrote by drug company,
I see that.
via sales reps in Oklahoma, correct?
You have that written, yes.
Literature paid for by Janssen,
I would say that, but again, there's literature that's not necessarily paid by Janssen either, that's in the peer-reviewed journals.
could be groups like American Pain Foundation or other third-party advocates, right?
It could be, or it could be a review in the medical letter that comes out that's reviewed by the medical clinicians around the drug itself.
Okay, great. And then I wrote peers, that was one of the things you said.
Yes?
And I bracketed off of that. Continuing medical education funded by Janssen happened in Oklahoma, right?
And again, I would just differentiate that CMEs, again, are not product related.
Okay.
So the CMEs are likely happening throughout in the disease state or issues that are happening in the community.
That's an important point. There's something called unbranded marketing, right?
Yes,
And you understand that when you do unbranded marketing about opioids, it has the potential to cause the sale of any opioid, not just the ones that your company sells, right?
potentially.
Potentially, okay. Now, we've got under here also speaker bureaus, correct?
Yes,
And I apologize, I'm gonna lean here, I don't wanna invade your private space here, but it says funded by Janssen in Oklahoma. Is that true?
so the speaker bureaus, again, are promotional in nature. They're specific to the product. And yes, they would have been funded by us, they would have been through our process review, or our review process.
Okay, and then there at the bottom, it says sales rep compensation tied to prescriptions, compensation not tied to propriety of the prescription. You see that?
I do,
And we had that conversation, you agreed that that was said, right?
I did, yes.
Okay, let me see one thing real quick. I just wrote something there. What I wrote, I drew an arrow to all the education and sales rep compensation. What I wrote was, all occurred on property in Oklahoma. Is that true?
If we're educating the Oklahoma doctors through different means, I would assume yes.
Okay, thank you. Everything on here is a fair statement of what we just summarized, right?
What we just talked about, yes.
I have nothing dishonest on here about what you said. This is a fair summary of your words, correct?
I believe so, yes.
Thank you, Your Honor. May I offer this as court's exhibit 4, please, Your Honor? Show it to me. Can you see it again?
I haven't seen what you wrote on there. You're gonna have to give me your glasses.
You got it.
It's got what you wrote on here. I have no objection to this being admitted as a court exhibit for the words that Mr. Beckworth put on there just assuming we can refer back to it.
Sure. Okay.
It'll be admitted as court's exhibit number 4.
May I approach? Hand that up here. I'm not exactly where you want it. Okay, so ma'am, just real quick.
Wait a
The-
minute.
Thanks, sir. The example we gave started in 1980, and we heard Dr. Courtwright testify up to 1980 yesterday. Do you remember that?
I do.
And what he said was, when we got to 1980, doctors were educated to know some things. One was we needed to use conservatism when it comes to prescribing narcotics, right?
Yes.
Because we had had crises in the past due to oversupply, right?
In the past, yes.
Okay, and that was, in your example on that timeline, that's where we find a doctor who practices from 1980 to 1990, at which point, in your example, the education begins with a new drug by the drug company, right?
So I just randomly selected 1980. So,
But it happened. It was 1980 to 1990, and then new drug and education started in 1991. You said that, and we wrote it down, right?
yeah,
Okay. Was your answer yes?
yes.
Okay. So at that point in the timeline, before you step in that example to educate doctors, everything that came before was what was provided by the medical schools, the literature that was out, and their judgment and clinical practice. True?
Yes.
Okay. And then the drug company takes over the education associated with the drug from that point forward through all the different things we discussed, right?
Specific to the drug, and again, there's multiple other areas or multiple other information sources, education that's in the marketplace as well.
Okay, thank you. Now, when you had sales reps here in Oklahoma, they were told to document their calls with doctors, correct?
They had call notes, yes.
And that was a memorialization of their interactions with the doctors from the perspective of the sales rep writing it down, correct?
So that would have been a snippet of what they had discussed, yes.
Okay. That was the sales rep's words.
Correct.
Reported back to their district manager and to Jansen in New Jersey, right?
Well, it was recorded on their computers, likely, yes.
And if it happened in Oklahoma, it would be what happened in Oklahoma, recorded and reported back to headquarters, right?
It would have been recorded, yes.
And you then would trace the productivity of those sales calls. And by productivity, I mean you would look at the prescribing behavior of each and every doctor they called upon, right?
We would look at the sales results, yes.
Sales results. That means prescriptions written and ultimately filled by a pharmacy here in Oklahoma, right?
That would be correct, yes.
Okay. And you use something called IMS data, right?
Correct.
You could track what every doctor was doing and how they prescribed drugs, right?
We could, yes.
And you could tell whether, when a sales rep went and called upon a doctor, whether that doctor's prescribing stayed flat, went up, or went down, right?
You would have a baseline of their prescriptions and you would see what that prescribing looked like, yes.
And you set targeted quotas for those representatives,
In what respect?
that they needed to go call upon doctors and their compensation would be determined based on the performance of the doctors they called upon, right?
So they had call plans, so the number of times they should call on the doctor. But there was no quota in place as far as what they needed to produce.
Well, we saw an example yesterday of the plus and minus. You would look at your sales reps and their compensation would be determined based on whether the prescriptions went up, down, or stayed flat. True?
True.
Okay. Now, in front of you, we saw a big to-do about this morning. We have presented a paper copy of all of the call notes in Oklahoma that we believe have been provided to us in this litigation. And, Your Honor, at this time, we would offer states 2481 through 2492, which is the printed out version of the call notes in Oklahoma provided to us. We'd ask that they be admitted into evidence.
Yes, Your Honor, these we've discussed at the bench before. They've been subject to prior discussion, so I would reassert all of those objections. These are hearsay. Some may fall within an exception, but they may contain hearsay within hearsay. It's impossible for us to tell when they move the entire admission of an exhibit consisting of all those documents. It's also the state's objection that we have been denied access to patient information, which we could coordinate with these call notes, among other things the court has previously ruled on. So for those reasons, I would object to the admission of the entire exhibit as one exhibit, realizing that we're going to see specific examples that we can address those concerns with.
Is it 2481?
Through 2492.
So it's 11 exhibits. How are those divided between these boxes?
There are 35 boxes, and each box has a label starting at volume 1 through volume 139, and on the front of each box it lists the entire range.
Your Honor, I'll add the pages within there are all identified as far as the exact state exhibit number that they're associated with, and they're in order, Your Honor.
So what's the difference between 2481 and 2482? Is it call notes organized by sales rep or by time? How?
It's in the order that they were produced to us, Your Honor. They produced 11 spreadsheets of call notes, each identified, and each one is individually printed out.
So one exhibit per spreadsheet?
Yes.
That was produced by the defendant?
Yes, Your Honor.
Okay.
And they're individually numbered and paginated.
So on our exhibit list, it's S2481 through 2492. They're spreadsheets that when you print them, they go on for days.
Do you have any other things you want to respond to Mr. Ottaway's objections?
Only if needed. I thought we kind of handled that previously, but if you need me to argue further, I will.
No, I'm going to go ahead and over the defendant's objections, admit 2481 through 2492. Will be admitted into the evidence.
Thank you, Your Honor. And I have one more real quick before we take a break. It's small if we can do that. Now, ma'am, use your speaker. You also made speaker payments here in the state of Oklahoma when you would pay a doctor to speak on your behalf or take him or her to lunch or dinner and things like that, correct?
If a speaker spoke for us,
Yes.
we would pay them for their time.
Your Honor, may I approach real quickly?
Yes, you may.
We have, in states 3080, there's a document that you, Dean Jansen, presented to us in this case in response to an interrogatory that lists a spreadsheet. You can just look at it real quick. I'm going to reach over you, excuse me, of those. This is, Your Honor, an interrogatory response, an exhibit from the defendants where they had a spreadsheet of what they purport to be each individual payment that occurred here in the state of Oklahoma from, dinners, lunches, coffees, whatever that happened. I think there's 800 or 900 pages. And at this time, we would offer that into evidence as well. S3080.
Your Honor, we'd like to review that over the break before it's admitted, so we can, 900 pages is a little hard for me to look at right here.
It is their interrogatory response and exhibit.
I don't doubt you, Brad. I'm just saying I'd kind of like to look before I make a formal response to your offer.
I will give you during the break.
Thank you very much, Your Honor.
080.
I'll try to read real fast.
At least that gets you out of the boxes.
Would you like me to continue or do you want to take a break now?
Let's go ahead and break now.
Thank you.
And we'll adjourn until 10:30. have a seat.
Right? Buzzwords, my fun.
He's a man of many hats. Ms. Fisher, you're recognized.
Yes, I'm going to mark this honor as for Exhibit 5, it's the photograph of the officers for personnel in it.
The exception of my appearance looks great.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I don't know my whole-
You may resume, Mr. Beverly.
Your Honor, we had offered a binder of speaker-related material. Mr. Otway informs me he's not objecting to part of it, but has some others that we want to look at during lunch, so maybe if you could
Your
put that on the
Honor, I
record.
have no objection to the admission of Exhibit 3080-48 through 871. The remainder of the exhibit we'll discuss over lunch and see if we can reach some agreement on.
So we will admit, I will admit States Exhibit 3080, pages
48
48 through
871.
871. Yes, and we'll take up the remainder of those pages
I need to write this.
in the future.
May we resume, Your Honor?
Go ahead.
So, ma'am, just before we move on, there's a lot of boxes, 35 in fact, that we were talking about speaker notes. Now, you used a term or a word called snippets. I asked you if they recorded the conversations that happened there. You said it was a snippet. Is that the word you used?
So the boxes were call notes, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
I think you just said speaker notes, so call notes.
Yes, the call notes, the 35, yes.
So they are a brief description of what the sales representative interaction may have been.
So it doesn't get it all.
Potentially, no.
Could have been a lot more.
It could have been more detailed, but not all of it could have been recorded, correct?
Okay. And you, Johnson & Johnson, would review those recorded call notes, right?
Sometimes, yes.
They would be used by district managers to see what was happening and how the sales reps were doing their job of selling, correct?
Interacting, potentially.
And they would go to corporate in New Jersey and would be reviewed there as part of the overall sales strategy for the corporation, right?
Potentially.
And you would use those in part to determine whether the sales messaging was effective in selling your drugs.
Potentially, not necessarily. So some of it would be, that may be part of what they may review.
Okay. So at least part of what you would do with that is to look at whether the messaging being used had the effect of prescriptions being written for your drugs, correct?
Potentially.
Okay. Thank you. Your Honor, may I approach?
Yes, you may.
I'm going to hand you, ma'am, Exhibit 2355.
Can I put this aside?
I'm going to put your copy right here. Okay.
Okay.
Your Honor, ma'am, I'm going to stand right here if that's okay. Would you please look at 2355 for just a moment? That is an email between various employees of Janssen & Johnson & Johnson. If you could you tell the court the date of that email? The one on top?
The top one is 2/16/2006.
And there are some addresses there, correct?
Yes.
May I look over your shoulder here for the side? They are, we see a JANAU on the top,
Yes.
and then we see a CC to cchupa1@janus.jnj.com. You see that?
I do.
That refers to Katie Chupa.
I believe so, yes.
She's an employee of Janssen or J&J that you know. You know who that is?
She was an employee.
Okay, and this is a chain of emails between J&J folks, correct?
So several of these folks, it appears, are from an agency, an outside agency.
And also Janssen employees, correct?
I believe Lynn Leonard and Katie Chupa are the two employees.
Okay, and Your Honor, at this time, we would offer 2355 as email correspondence with Janssen employees.
Yeah, I'm just confirming, Your Honor, what I thought. This witness is not anywhere on this email, so we would object to lack of foundation, personal knowledge, the things we talked about at the bench before.
Your Honor, this is directly to what Ms. Johnson talked about in opening statement about whether they launched or relaunched Duragesic. This is the conversation where that happened among J&J employees, and she was their corporate rep on these issues.
I'll overrule the objection.
Your Honor, may we also, so this one's admitted?
I'll admit 2355.
May we also publish 2355?
Yes.
Thank you. Mike. I'll just stay here if that's okay. So here we have this email from Daniel Keenan dated February 16, 2006. You see that?
I see this, yes?
He's an account manager for KPR. You see that there in New York?
I do.
Okay, we're going to get to the back part of this here in just a minute, but the subject line is Duragesic historical sales aids, correct?
It says that, yes?
And here it says, "Hi Lynn, per your previous request, attached are PDF files we were able to locate for the selected historical Duragesic campaigns." You see that?
I do.
Okay. Now, Mr. Mike, we'll go down to the very last page of this email. Okay, so if you'll blow that up. Okay, this is an email from Kay Deguchi to Katie Chupa. Now, Katie Chupa is someone that was involved in the Duragesic marketing at J&J, correct?
I believe so, yes.
And on January 9th of 2006, this email goes to her, and it says, "Truly a pleasure to meet you today. Thanks for helping Mark. He will find the historical promo materials and Viz aids helpful." And Ms. Ainge, that's VIS, short for visual. Do you see that, ma'am?
I do.
Okay, and if you look down below, it says, "Lynn, Mark has asked if he could get hold of historical promo materials as U.S. started out with cancer, then expanded into non-cancer." Do you see that?
I do.
Okay. Now, Mike, if you'll go to up a little bit more. To the next one. Okay. Now, if you'll blow this one up, Mike. Now, you just stated that Katie Chupa was involved with Duragesic, right?
Yes.
Okay. This is from her, dated January 10th, 2006. It says, I asked KPR to resend this stuff to me. It was on my old Janssen computer." It says that, right?
It does, yes.
Okay. Now, the next sentence says, "We have had one agency since Duragesic was launched in 1991 for cancer pain and 1997 for non-cancer," correct?
It says that, yes.
Right there in black and white, right?
It says that, yes.
Two distinct dates. Launched in 91 for cancer pain and 97 for non-cancer, right?
It says that, yes.
And that's from Katie Chupa, and read please for the court. What was her position at that time?
She was, at this time, she was the executive director of the global marketing leader in analgesia.
Okay, so it's right there in black and white. It says what it says, right?
It says that Duragesic was launched in 91 for cancer pain and 97 for non-cancer.
That's what I said in the opening statement at the very beginning of this case. You were here for that, right?
I was here for your opening statement.
And you heard me say it.
Say what?
That there was a use or launch of Duragesic in 1991 for cancer pain, and then in 1997, started marketing it for non-cancer. And it
I
says
would
it
say-
right there, doesn't it?
I would say that in 91, we launched Duragesic for cancer pain and then expanded into non-cancer.
1997.
Correct.
Okay, thank you. We're done with that one. All right. Your Honor, may I approach?
Yes, you may.
State's Exhibit S1044. This is the code of conduct, Your Honor. I think you have that. Ma'am, you and I have talked about this before. State's Exhibit 1044 is the code of conduct for Johnson & Johnson, correct?
Correct.
You're familiar with this document?
I am.
It's published worldwide on the internet. I can find it right now if we pull it up. That's true, right?
Correct.
Okay. Your Honor, we would offer State's P1044 at this time.
I have no objection.
State's Exhibit 1044 will be admitted.
Thank you. Now, ma'am, the code of conduct at Johnson & Johnson is your code, right?
Is what?
Your code.
Is the Johnson & Johnson Code of Conduct?
Right.
Yes.
The code that the company and all of its employees must adhere to.
It is expected, yes.
It's what defines, as a primary matter, the conduct that everyone at the company must abide by.
Is expected to abide by, yes.
That applies to you.
It does.
It applies to anyone that does business here in the state of Oklahoma for Johnson & Johnson or any of its companies,
It does apply to any employee of J&J, yes.
including sales reps here in Oklahoma,
Yes.
including the chairman of the board.
Including the chairman of the board of J&J, yes.
It sets and defines and reminds what it is you're supposed to do as an employee of J&J throughout all the business you do here in Oklahoma, right?
It is J&J's Code of Business Conduct, yes.
Okay. Mike, can you pull up? Your Honor, may we publish this?
Yes, you may.
Go to our credo, Mike. There at the top it says, we believe our first responsibility is to the doctors, nurses, and patients, to mothers and fathers, and all others who use our products and services, right?
It says that, yes.
That is the number one stated first sentence of the Johnson & Johnson credo, right?
It is.
Well, Mike, if you'll go to the bottom paragraph. It says our final responsibility is to our stockholders, right?
It says that, yes.
The idea of that, ma'am, is that you have to put doing things the right way above making money, right?
It goes through our responsibilities for doctors, nurses, and patients, employees, communities, and then the stockholders.
Well, thank you. Doctors, patients, mothers, fathers, sons, daughters, entire communities, they all must come first, right?
They are listed before, yes.
Safety before profits.
I would say responsibility before profits, yes.
And responsibility would include safety,
It could, yes.
honesty.
So again, it outlines our responsibility to the doctors, nurses, and patients.
Does that responsibility include being honest?
I would believe that honesty is woven throughout this.
It is, isn't it? Honesty, truthfulness. That's part of what your company must do.
Well, we need to do, it says right here that in meeting their needs, everything must be of high quality.
Everything including the truth?
I would expect that in this, again, high quality would include that.
That being what?
Providing high quality products, ensuring that it's all written down here. We can read through the entire thing.
Well, I'm asking a very simple question. Here is Johnson & Johnson. That's the position you're in. Does this include the truth? I mean, are you struggling with that? Is
No.
the truth part of your code?
It is meeting the needs and everything we do of high quality. So I would expect, yes, that we are truthful in what we do.
Okay. And there in the paragraph right above it, it says, we are responsible to the communities in which we live and work, and to the world community as well. You see that?
I do.
We must be good citizens, support good works and charities, and bear our fair share of taxes, right?
Yes.
So you require yourself to be a good citizen of the communities where you work, right?
Yes.
You worked here in Oklahoma, right?
Yes.
How much money has Johnson & Johnson spent in Oklahoma to abate the opioid crisis we have? Here in Oklahoma specifically?
Sir, I don't know as I know that answer.
Have you spent $1?
Again, based on what I've looked at, I don't know as I'm, have the understanding of knowing that.
Well, you do understand that this case is seeking abatement to fix the opioid crisis that we have, right?
Yes.
You do understand that we've accused Johnson & Johnson as being a cause of the opioid crisis that we have, right?
I understand that, yes.
Yet you don't know whether you've spent a single dollar in the state of Oklahoma to help abate the crisis that we have?
That's the third time he's asked the question, and she says she didn't know.
Objection sustained.
Will you look at that for me?
Excuse me, Your Honor.
I think that's a fair question, Your
It's
Honor.
not a fair requirement. We've already done the discovery in this case. Putting responsibilities on the witness on the stand is improper.
I'll sustain the objection as well.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Now, if you'll turn Mike to 005 where it says introduction there at the bottom. Go to the bottom there. It says why we have a code and why we must follow it. Do you see that?
Yes.
It says you have a responsibility to speak up when you are in a situation or are aware of a situation that you believe may violate or lead to a violation of the code, company policy, or the law. It says that, right?
It says that, yes.
You would agree with me that you, as a company, have a responsibility that when you see something being done that violates that code or the law or your policies, you have a duty to speak up and try to do something about it. True?
If you have an understanding of that, if you see that or have a clear understanding of that, yes.
Okay, thank you. Mike, you'll turn to 12. There it says, every employee's duty. Do you see that?
I see it.
And may I approach, Your Honor?
Yes, you may.
If we look here, this would be easier. Right here towards the bottom, the next to last bullet point, it says one of those duties is following all laws and regulations regarding the promotion, marketing, and sales of our products, including ensuring that what we say is truthful, not misleading, and is consistent with regulatory approvals for our products. You see that?
I do.
So there's that word I was asking about truthful.
Yes.
So you agree with me now, it's here in the document.
Which I
Right.
believed it was. I just didn't see it, so
Yes,
yes.
ma'am. And what this is talking about is that when you market your drugs, you have to talk about them in a truthful and not misleading way, correct?
When we promote our drugs, we promote them to their label. Yes. It's been approved by the FDA.
But you have to do it in a truthful and not misleading way,
Correct.
right? Because there's three components to that. The one you answered was consistent with regulatory approvals. The prior two says what we say must be truthful, not misleading, right?
Correct.
And that applies in your branded marketing,
Correct.
in your unbranded marketing,
It would be how we present the, how we market our drugs, or yes,
and that includes
Prior to.
your, I'm sorry,
or prior to.
and that includes your sales reps as well.
Our sales reps, yes, should be truthful and not misleading.
Okay, thank you. I know that. Set that aside, Mia. You'll just make a stack. We may come back to some of these as we go. No objection? Okay. Your Honor, I'm going to hand the witness, just for sake of the record, we have a document in your folder and an exhibit that's 2376. Rather than, we'll just at this time go to one page of that, which is, I'm going to hand, Your Honor. You want to put the whole document in? Okay, we'll do the whole document. Okay, easy enough. We'll offer 2376, which the defendants have said there's no objection to. May we admit that?
2376 will be admitted into the evidence.
Ma'am, I'm going to hand you 2376. This is a lengthy stack. We're just going to talk about one page right now. 2376 is a file for speaker training for Nucenta in October 2012. Do you see that on the cover?
I do.
Your Honor, I'd like permission to publish a page from that document. It's now in evidence.
Is that the one that's dash 002?
020.
020?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, permission to publish.
Now, you saw, ma'am, if you'll turn attention, if I may approach, Your Honor.
Yes.
We talked about this at the beginning of this trial as well. This is a page out of that document for training purposes that explains when someone's speaking on behalf of your company what they must and must not do. And it gives examples of false misleading. You were here when I talked about that on Tuesday, right?
Yes.
Okay. I think you'll agree as we go down these. I just want to explain for the court what these mean, so it's not in my words. The first one here is broadening a product indication. That means, right, when you go out and talk about a product, you can't take a product that's intended for one thing and try to say it's indicated or intended for other things that aren't part of the indication, correct?
Outside of the product indication, yes.
Okay. Data taken out of context, that would mean you can't take data that means one thing and then use it to imply another thing, right?
That would be a good explanation, yes.
We heard Dr. Portnoy talk about that yesterday, about the importance of using information in context. You were here for that?
Yes.
Okay. Minimization of safety issues. Now that's very important, right?
Yes.
When you're dealing with something like an addictive, potentially deadly Schedule II narcotic prescription drug, we should never minimize safety issues, now should we?
We always want to balance efficacy and safety.
And you never minimize safety in that balancing.
Correct, you want to balance the two.
Now, omission of material information, that simply means that if you know information that is material to the context or the balance, you should not omit it.
You want to be, yes, you want to be forthright with the information that's available.
Forthright. That's your word?
Bring it forward.
Okay. The next one's comparative efficacy or safety claims without substantial evidence, and it gives an example of label-to-label comparisons. You see that?
I do.
So you're not supposed to compare your drug to another company's drugs, label to label, unless you have adequate, well-controlled head-to-head trials to support any such claims, right?
Correct.
And in your own words, even then, label-to-label comparisons are not allowed, right?
That would be package insert to package insert.
Not allowed.
Comparing them,
Did
no.
you instruct your sales agents on that?
Correct.
You did?
Yes.
Okay. So they should never have done that.
Label to label, they're not supposed to.
Okay. This last one, overstatements of efficacy or safety. What does that mean?
Again, if you don't have a comparison, there's examples right there. Superior to, more effective. The examples are right there.
So you should never say, for example, that your drug is superior to another drug, right?
Unless you have head-to-head.
You should not say it's more effective or better than another drug, correct?
Unless you have head-to-head.
You should not say it's safer than or more tolerable than another drug.
Again, unless you have a comparative study.
And this is all especially true with Schedule II narcotics, because in that balance, you always have to look at the efficacy of the drug compared to the potential safety of taking that drug, right?
I would say it's across all drugs,
Including prescription narcotics.
including prescription opioids, yes.
You would agree with me that all of these were required by your company and your sales reps at all times when you were branding or unbranded marketing of your drugs.
These are examples of false and misleading
And
examples.
This is what your company and your employees and anyone working on your behalf must abide by.
They should abide by those, yes?
Thank you. All right, I'm going to approach with state 0035. Do you wear reading glasses?
Oh, is this one that's going to,
Well,
Take
it's so
massive
hard to go back
magnification.
and forth all the time. I hate it, but you're probably going to need them. This is 0035, but can you see pretty well when we use this?
I can.
Okay, well, I'll walk you through here. I think that would be faster. Can I stay up here, Jim?
Sure.
Okay. So this document, state 0035, is a document produced by Janssen in this litigation entitled Executive Summary, Chronic Pain Scientific Advisory Board, dated November 30th, 2001. You see that?
November 30th.
I'm sorry, November
It's okay.
30th, 2001.
I see that, yes.
And it says here, objective, KOLs to visit Janssen, understand J&J and Janssen, introduce Janssen's EMRP research program with MSLs. Let's stop there. MSLs is what? Medical Science Liaisons?
Yes.
Okay. That's something that you used with your company as an advisory capacity, right?
So medical science liaisons are part of the Med Affairs group.
Okay. And here, this list an audience, it says 17 KOLs, list attached, right?
Says that, yes?
And it says Janssen attendees, and it lists several Janssen employees at the time, correct?
I believe so,
And
yes.
it gives a location, Janssen home office boardroom, correct?
It says that, yes.
Okay, Your Honor, at this time, we would offer state 0035 into evidence.
No objection, Your Honor.
States exhibit 0035 will be admitted.
May we publish this, Your Honor?
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you. Now, man, we're just going to walk through this document. There's a lot of information here. Like I said, a minute when I said it, I was wearing a turtle tie today because we'll have to be kind of slow. There is a rabbit in here, so we might be quick at some point. We'll see. Okay, so if we go down here to executive summary, can you explain to the court how Janssen used KOLs in this medical liaison advisory capacity?
So oftentimes Janssen would bring forth key opinion leaders, and I think it's important that the court understand that key opinion leaders are thought leaders in their therapeutic area. Janssen doesn't determine who the KOLs or the thought leaders are. The community in which they practice medicine does. In our case, in medicine. And they're across every therapeutic area. There's thought leaders in those areas. Oftentimes, Janssen will use these thought leaders to consult with, to provide advice over certain issues or things that are happening in the market. We may use them as to help us define what research we should be doing. We may even consult with them as far as clinical trials, how clinical trials should be set up. So they are the thought leaders in that specific therapeutic area that we reach out to for different advice, if I can use that word.
And when you said earlier that you educate doctors, these folks are supposed to educate you,
Oftentimes they do, and oftentimes they educate their peers as well.
and they should influence you as well in making the right decisions, right?
So we oftentimes will look to them for, like I said, advice, or in this sense, an advisory board to help determine how to, best approach the marketplace.
When did you start with J&J?
1991,
Okay. So you were there in 2001.
I was.
And you know that by 2000, 2001, 4 or 5 years after the launch of OxyContin in 1996, you were experiencing news stories and government reports about negative consequences with the proliferation of OxyContin. True?
Again, going back that far, I'm not sure I would remember that, so.
Well, let's walk through this document. This says, the executive summary reviewing the agenda. Gary's review of market trends in long-acting opioid prescribing led to a discussion about the negative effects of OxyContin abuse stories in the media. Now, Duragesic was a long-acting opioid, true?
Correct.
It says OxyContin was over-marketed to inexperienced PCPs. And let's stop there. PCP is known as a primary care physician, right?
Correct.
Now, when I was growing up as a kid, that was, my doctor was named John Pete. That was like the family doctor. We called him a general practitioner, right?
Yes,
And now we call that a primary care physician.
correct.
In opioid prescribing, the primary care physician became very important because as changes in insurance payments occurred, you oftentimes had to go to a primary care physician first before you could get referred out to a specialist, true?
Well, oftentimes, even when you were growing up, when I was growing up, the general practitioner broadly took care of many different situations that you may have. So that's why they were called general practitioners, right? So oftentimes, yes, they would be the first individual that you would seek medical attention from before you were then advised to go to a specialist.
Got it. And I'm not gonna ask you when you grew up. I'll just assume it was far after me. So I think that's the safe way to
Thanks.
do that. You're welcome. So PCPs here, you're being told here that PCPs who are inexperienced lacked knowledge, skill in pain management and opioid prescribing. You see that?
I see it written there, yes.
Okay. This is being told to you in 2001, right?
This is reported in 2001.
And this is talking about what had happened in the past. OxyContin was over-marketed to this group of doctors, correct?
That's what it says here.
Okay, and you heard Dr. Portnoy talk about that yesterday, that looking at PCPs, that was part of the problem. They were inexperienced in using opioids to treat pain and also inexperienced in being able to assess addiction and know what to do about it. You heard him say that, right?
I don't, yeah, I don't remember.
Okay, so this is told to you here. Now the next one says opioid phobia. Now that's a term that you guys used in the industry, you guys being Janssen and Johnson & Johnson. And I'll just tell you I'm gonna struggle with that because I say y'all. So Johnson & Johnson, Janssen. Y'all used opiophobia.
So opioid yeah, I'm gonna not say that right. Opiophobia was a term in the marketplace.
That people were scared of opioids.
Well, it was yes.
And so it says here it had increased as a result with short and long-acting opioid prescribing going down, right?
It says that.
And it suggests that patients are suffering as well as doctors because they don't want to be a policeman. That's what it says, right?
It says that, yes.
So let's just stop there for a minute. By 2000, 2001, with the advent of marketing opioids, broader indications than we had in the past, we've got abuse stories coming out. Opiophobia is happening, right?
It is, yes.
People, including doctors, are worried about prescribing, right?
That's what it says here, yes.
It says prescribers and pharma companies share responsibility for understanding the use and abuse of opioids, right?
It says that, yes.
Okay. Now the next one, we've heard some about the FDA, and our case isn't about that. But one of the things we heard from Johnson & Johnson in their opening statement was, well, the FDA did this and the FDA did that. Here, this executive summary, it says that the FDA perception of opioids is affected. And it says here, we need an educational policy and strategies to educate physicians and the FDA and their physician advisors about the proper use of opioids, right?
It says that, and again, I think it's important to recognize that this is the executive summary coming out of the discussion with these key opinion leaders.
Yes.
And this is what the key opinion leaders are saying. So there you see the reference to pain, which I'm assuming we have the attendees of the meeting. I'm assuming that might be Richard Payne.
It would be Richard Payne. So let's just deconstruct that a little bit. These are the KOLs that you brought in to educate you, and the executive summary of what they said is right here, right?
Part of, yes, they're advising us, this is a discussion that took place as far as what's happening.
So if they're telling you that Oxycontin and opioid is being over-marketed to inexperienced PCPs who lack knowledge and skill, you knew then at least that your key opinion leaders were telling you that doing that was a problem.
Well, they're saying that OxyContin was over-marketed to inexperienced PCPs.
Okay, so same would be true, right? Marketing or over-marketing a narcotic to PCPs who lack the knowledge or skill in pain management and opioid prescribing is problematic. That was told to you then, right?
They're talking about, yes, over-marketing to inexperienced PCPs.
That's wrong, shouldn't do it.
Well, they're saying that it was a problem.
Okay. And as we just said in your timeline example we did earlier, you believe that the medical schools hadn't educated about certain drugs, and so your sales representatives took it upon themselves to go educate those prescribers. Right?
Excuse me, Your Honor, that mischaracterizes the prior testimony. Objection. Now Mr. Beckworth is testifying about what he wants the evidence to be.
That's fine. Please correct me if I said something wrong.
Objection sustained.
You understand what I'm asking?
It was sustained.
I'm asking a new question.
Well,
Do
you
you
don't
understand
get to
what I'm
ask the
asking?
old question in the phrase of a new question.
Mr. Becker, you should rephrase or ask a different question.
But we did a timeline earlier, right?
Yes.
And you talked about how you, being the company, would take it to your sales reps to try to educate physicians. Is that a fair summary of what you said?
When a drug was launched, yes, our sales representatives would educate physicians, yes.
Because they would be at least inexperienced with that drug.
Again, assumes facts out in evidence. Same question, Your Honor.
Objection sustained.
You sought to educate doctors here, right?
Doctors who were in the sales representative's call plan who were deemed appropriate for that education, yes.
And you sought to influence them, right?
Again, you and I have a disagreement with the word influence. Influence starts with that education. And again, I repeat, our goal was to educate the physicians on the benefits and risks of our products. And with that, if the physician deemed that an appropriate medication for their patients, and they wrote that prescription, if you call that influence, then yes, through the education to influence that prescription, I will agree with you on that.
You called it influence.
Again, but the way that you influence is through education.
We'll get to your documents on that, and we'll discuss it then. Can we go back to review of Allen and Milligan data? Page 4. So here, one of the PharmDs that was there is reviewing something called Allen and Milligan data. Do you see that?
I see that.
And it talks about a lot of different studies, right?
Let me just read through it.
Sure.
Okay.
Now, this is 2001. Duragesic had been out since 1991.
Yes.
And as we saw from Ms. Chupa's email, the marketing of it as a non-cancer drug was at least there in 1997, right? So 4 years before this document.
Yes.
Okay, so if we go down here to the fourth bullet point, it says Cheryl responded that the PI, that would be the package insert, puts the patient in the ballpark for pain control, and the physician should titrate up from there. You see that?
I see that.
Now, titration means you take a patient from one dose, and as their tolerance level builds up, you can take them up to higher doses, correct?
That's what titration means.
Okay. And the response here is, that's the problem, Dr. Benjamin responded. PCPs do not know how to titrate. You see that?
I see that.
Now, your KOL's telling you that 10 years after Duragesic had been launched, right?
Yes.
4 years after Duragesic had been launched for non-cancer pain in 1997, right?
It appears that way, yes.
4 years. Then it says Cheryl indicated this was an area for education and that Janssen had a major commitment to an education initiative for PCPs. See that?
I do.
So 10 years after it's launched, 4 years after it's expanded to non-cancer pain, we still see that you believe there needs to be an education initiative for primary care physicians to learn how to properly titrate up your drugs to higher doses, right?
If it's needed, yes.
Okay. Then if we go down to the bottom, if we look to the second to last bullet point, it's talking about these Allen and Milligan studies, and it says they do not give their conversion calculations. This is a weakness. They do not state how long initial side effects lasted, and this also is important information to know. Do you see that?
I do.
We're going to talk about Allen and Milligan quite a bit today, but you see that that's being conveyed to you by your own KOLs at that point, right?
It is written there, yes.
Okay, if we can turn to the next page, please, Mike, 05. You'll see at the top here, we'll go down the bottom in a minute, it says Market Research Message Refinement, V2E. What is V2E? Do you recall?
No.
You would bring in folks to help understand your marketing message and whether it's working or needed refinement. That's something you did in marketing all the time at Janssen, right?
We did what? I'm sorry.
You would use consultants to come in and help you look at your marketing effort to see if your message was on point or needed refinement.
We use consultants, yes.
In fact, one of the ones you used was McKinsey,
McKinsey's used across the industry, yes.
including at Janssen and Johnson & Johnson.
Yes.
Somebody you paid to do consulting that you would then rely on in how you market it.
So consultants would do much work. Whether we actually implemented some of that was determined by the marketplace at the time.
And for example, McKinsey, you worked closely with them and you did for many years, still do.
I would say they would do specific projects for us.
Still do.
Potentially, yes.
Okay. So here, if we'll go down to the part that says, right here at the bottom, what are your information needs concerning the abuse of opioids? And one of the second bullet points here, it says, what are the actual rates of abuse? Do you see that?
I see that.
Then it goes down to say, are there predictive factors to identify patients who are prone to abuse? Are pain patients who use prescribed long-acting opioids the same or different from street drug users? You see that?
I do.
Is there a relationship between euphoria and addiction abuse? You see that?
I see that.
Okay, keep that in mind. Let's go to the next one, Mike. It goes on to say, what should be the sources of this information? And the first thing it says is, there are no data on these issues. The research should be done to get these data. You see that?
I do.
As we stand here today in this courtroom in Norman, Oklahoma, what is the rate of iatrogenic addiction using a long-acting opioid under the care of a primary care physician? What is the rate?
Okay, so could you please again define for me the IO? Yes.
Iatrogenic addiction would mean that when someone goes to a doctor and begins taking a narcotic under the doctor's care, they become addicted through the normal course of using the drug. What was the rate of iatrogenic addiction for Duragesic based on high-quality clinical studies that Janssen had in 2001?
Excuse me, Your Honor, I object. This assumes facts, not evidence. There is no single rate.
There's no single what?
Rate, the way the question is asked.
Well, now, Your Honor, I think we need to approach the bench.
Overrule the objection. Go ahead.
Can we approach the bench? Good. And you do not know, Johnson & Johnson, you do not know the rate of iatrogenic addiction for any patient that comes in and gets an opioid, long-acting opioid, under the care of a primary care physician. You don't know.
Well, I'm not a medical professional, so I don't believe that I'm the right person to ask that. So my personal, I do not know.
Jansen doesn't know.
Again, I'm not a medical professional, so I don't know.
Now, you previously testified in this case. You previously testified in this case, right?
I did.
And we asked you this very same question, right?
I believe so.
You testified under oath that day, didn't you?
Yes.
Your Honor, may I approach witness?
Yes, you may.
What page was it? I'm going to show you, I'm going to let you read this real quick. I'm going to reach over you. This is your testimony on January 25th, 2019.
Excuse
Reading
me,
from
Mr.
page-
Beckworth, can I see the
Reading
page
from
and line?
page 246, 247.
Page one.
The question was asked, sitting
Excuse me,
here
can
today,
you give me just a second?
sorry,
We're trying to get there.
you can look at it real quick.
Give me just a second.
246, line 22, Mr. Ottaway.
Thank you. I'm getting there.
Okay. It says, sitting here today, no one still knows what the actual risk of addiction is for using opioids to treat chronic non-cancer pain, do they? And your answer was?
Not that I'm aware of.
Thank you. No one knows.
Excuse me, I object improper impeachment, same answer both times.
No one knows.
Sorry, I believe the witness testified she did not know.
No one knows.
Again, I don't know.
You heard Dr. Portnoy testify about this yesterday, right?
I did.
No one knew in 1997, right?
No.
And no one knows today.
Specifically, no.
There's never been a high-quality clinical study done by Janssen that you know of that tells us what the rate of iatrogenic addiction is taking your drugs, long-acting opioid, Duracezin, for any given period of time under the primary care physician's care, right?
Not that I'm aware of.
Okay. And this here says there are no data on these issues. The research should be done to get these data. That was back in 2001, right?
It was, and I think that Dr. Portnoy said yesterday, those studies are very, very difficult to do. So
You can't say that the addiction rate or iatrogenic addiction rate, even when you take an opioid under the care of a primary care physician, is 1, 2, 3, or 4%. It's not based on actual high-quality clinical data. True?
Repetitive, been asked and answered with this witness.
Objection sustained.
Thank you.
Should you say it?
Same question, Your Honor, just
All
spelled
right,
different.
that is a completely different question. I'm asking her, we've established that they don't know. We've established they don't have the evidence. The question is different. Should you say you know the risk under those circumstances?
Objection, Your Honor. She has said she doesn't know. Need to ask others. Asking
To answer
others.
this question, I'll overrule you.
Thank you.
Based on the data that was available at the time, that was what was thought in the marketplace,
What
in the
was?
community. What you just said,
That it was low?
yes.
Well, right
When-
here in 2001, it says you don't know.
Specifically, no.
So it would have been wrong to say you knew specifically when in fact you did not know.
Based on the evidence that was available at the time, that was based on what the market was communicating.
That evidence, that no data, I'm very confused.
There was data. They were looking for more specific data, more further data out, as Dr. Portnoy discussed yesterday, the longer term utilization of the medications.
So you said it, but you didn't have the data to support it.
Again, the support in the marketplace at the time that was there was based on what the community was saying.
We just went over examples of false and misleading. One of the ones you agreed was there was data taken out of context, right?
Yes?
Minimization of safety issues, right?
Yes?
Overstatements of efficacy or safety, right?
Yes?
Omission of material information, right?
Yes?
Isn't it true that when you're dealing with something as dangerous and highly addictive as a Schedule II narcotic opioid, if you make a statement about its addictive rate under the care of a doctor, you owe it to say we don't actually have the data that supports what the risk is. You owe that under your own code.
And what I'm saying is the data that was available in the marketplace at that time and in the community, and even Dr. Portnoy said yesterday that in the community at that point in time, that was the data that they referred to.
What data?
The research that had been done in this patient population and in this marketplace.
Isn't it true there was only one statement that you should have made, and that statement was, if you take these long-acting opioids for a long period of time under the care of a primary care physician, we do not have the clinical data to tell you what will happen. We don't know.
Well, in every one of our package inserts for our long-acting opioid, it did speak to the risk of addiction.
They said there was a risk of addiction, right?
Yes?
And it said if you were worried about addiction, you should talk to your doctor, right?
Absolutely, and you should, but the risk of addiction was outlined in the package insert.
What risk? 1%? 5%? 25%? What was the risk?
Objection again, Your Honor. She said she doesn't know.
I'll overrule the objection.
Thank you.
Again, an individual risk of addiction is unknown.
Thank you. Okay, let's go back to the doctor. To your last thing, it's unknown today, right?
To individual, yes.
And it's never been known.
Individually,
Yes, ma'am?
specifically, not that I'm aware of.
Thank you very much. Okay, Mike, if we can go to, should the abuse potential of Duragesic be discussed? Do you see that? The consensus here to that question, ma'am, by your KOLs was no. Resounding and unanimous. It is bad for the long-acting opioid class and bad for patients and prescribers. You see that?
I see that, yes.
And we're looking at messaging. They also said something else. Can you read the next sentence?
Drug abusers will figure out how to abuse Duragesic once it's more available. Currently, it may be less abused, and there is a dangerous, narrow margin between a recreational dose to get high and a lethal dose. As market share goes up, so will abuse. Overpromising on the lack of abusability is what got OxyContin in trouble. Duragesic should not repeat the same mistake.
This is your MSL group, your KOLs telling you that drug abusers will figure out how to abuse Duragesic once it is more available, right?
It says that, yes.
Okay. And that the margin between a recreational dose to get high and a lethal dose is a dangerous, narrow one, right?
It says that, yes.
When I talked about oversupply and then you will die, it says right here a different version. As market share goes up, so will abuse, right?
It says that,
It
yes.
says that overpromising on the lack of abusability is what got OxyContin in trouble, right?
It says that.
Okay. Do not repeat the same mistake, right?
It says that.
This was conveyed to you by your educational influencers, your paid KOLs, told your company this in 2001, correct?
This was part of an advisory board.
Okay. Now, we go down here, there's a dissenting opinion. Comparing the patch to Percocet, the patch is less abusable, less prone to self-administration behavior. And for high-risk patients, I give them the patch. See that?
I see that.
But it goes on to say it requires a lot of education for physicians and patients. And you, now read this for us, please. You what?
You can't just say the patch is less abusable.
Did you tell that to your sales reps here in Oklahoma? That they can't just say the patch is less abusable?
Again, I didn't train the sales reps in Oklahoma, so I'm not sure.
Did Janssen?
Again, that is, again, outside of, I wasn't a sales trainer, so I don't know.
Well, did your company take this information from your paid KOLs and use it to train your sales force that came into our state here in Oklahoma?
This is one document. I'm not sure what subsequently happened as far as what came out of this document.
All right. Here at the bottom it says, the relapse to drug abuse is a complex issue involving many social and psychological factors. You agree with that?
I see it written here.
Let's go to the bottom of this page, Mike, please. Now, we're looking at different messages, and there's two proposed messages that talk about rate of abuse, and they're referring to something called DAWN data. You see that?
I see that.
Okay. Here it says, when we're talking about a messaging that uses a 0.1% rate of abuse according to DAWN data, it says unanimous rejection of the, quote, reported rate of abuse less than 0.1% DAWN data. You see that?
I see that.
Right here it says question the DAWN definition of abuse. You see that?
I see that.
Need to know the numbers, what percent of prescriptions of each drug is abused. There are many more oxycodone prescriptions than Duragesic prescriptions, right?
I see that.
Okay. Your folks are telling you don't use DAWN data because it's not reliable in the construct of Duragesic. It's right there, isn't it?
Well, it just, it says exactly what they're saying they question what the definition of abuse is in DAWN. So they want to know that. And they want to know the denominators of the numbers. So,
Don't do that. Unanimous rejection, right?
well, they have questions around some of the DAWN data, what's behind the DAWN data.
Thank you. Turn to the next page, please, Mike. Now, if we go down to message 2, and we look here where it says rejection of abuse statistics, we're seeing this again related to DAWN. You see DAWN's up here. Here it says rejection of abuse statistics, reasons cited above, and drug addicts will abuse Duragesic. X% of the population are drug abusers. How to identify them is the important question. Provide the numbers on abuse. Do you see that?
I see that.
And then if we go down to message 3, we see this DAWN as a repeating theme. It says continued rejection of the DAWN data and abuse statistics is cited above. You see that?
I see that.
Now, you have some statements from Pasic, for one, as one of your KOLs. Duragesic has been around for 10 years with only a handful of arrests for diversion abuse. And we heard that the other day, right?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
But it still says if you give Duragesics to patients who have no history of substance abuse, how many will abuse it? And the answer is,
We don't know. We need the data.
did you ever get the data?
I'm not sure.
And then it says, tell the truth. How many people are abusers, addicts? How do you identify them? Right there, right?
It's written, yes.
And then we have a conclusion. Go back. Bottom of that page, we have a conclusion. Do not include the abuse message. Do not sell opioids on the abuse issue. You see that?
I see that.
Now, we used some call notes in our opening statement to the court, and you saw in those call notes that your sales reps here in Oklahoma, 2004, 2005, were doing this exact thing. They were selling opioids on the abuse issue. You saw it, you were here, right?
I saw that they messaged the Dawn data.
Now, your KOLs told your company in 2001, don't do it, right?
They said it in 2001. I don't know if the Dawn data was updated with some of these answers to some of these questions.
It would be wrong to ignore your own MSL KOLs and the instructions that they use to educate your company.
And again, I don't know as we used the Dawn data in 2001 after this was done. So I don't know if the Dawn data was updated and answered some of these questions that I'm not sure of.
So, slightly different question. I appreciate your answer. Is it wrong for your company to ignore what your own 17 KOLs tell you?
Not necessarily. If the KOLs are advising the organization on, what their thoughts are. And again, the KOLs, there may have been significant discussion around reasons why obviously, in this case in 2001, they gave specific reasons why. But again, in 2003, there may have been updates. I don't know.
Well, let's hold that. We're going to go through that in quite some detail today. Mike, can we go to page 09, please? Now, Nathaniel Katz was one of your KOLs that was there, correct?
I don't know. You'd have to show me.
Let's go through it. If we can blow this up, Mike. You heard us talk with Mr. Fisk, paper. You heard Dr. Courtwright talk about this historical view about opioids. And here's one of the things that Dr. Katz is talking about. He's talking about opioids for chronic non-cancer pain, critical challenges and opportunities. You see that?
I do.
And it says, Dr. Katz began with historical perspectives on opioids, which were described favorably by ancient Sumerians, Egyptians, and Chinese. You see that?
I do.
And it goes on to say that as early as 300 BC, the Greeks noted the harmful effects of opioids, including addiction. Right?
I see that, yes.
We've heard that. We've always known that addiction happens, right?
With opioids, they do have an addictive, yes.
We've also known that when you have an oversupply, it causes people to die.
Again, that's your phrase that you're using.
Dr. Katz is about to use a very similar refrain. He says, by the late 17th and 18th centuries, opium abuse was reported while growing of opium in India was encouraged. And China was forced to accept opium imports. You see that?
I see that.
And we all should know our history about here. This led to opium wars in China due to the oversupply. We had widespread addiction. It's common knowledge of history, isn't it?
Excuse me, Your Honor, that's not, if he's just asking you to read the document, that's not what the document says.
But that's fair. I'm not asking about the document. We're looking at it. It is common knowledge that in the history of man, including China, when you have an oversupply, it leads to widespread addiction.
I don't know as it says that there is a oversupply here. It says that while growing of opium in India was encouraged, that led to addiction.
As we heard Dr. Courtwright say yesterday, this is 1803, synthesized morphine. Within decades, It was widely employed medicinally. You see that?
I see that.
Like Dr. Courtwright said, morphine addiction became a severe problem during the American Civil War. Says that too, right?
I see that, yes.
Okay. All right, thank you. Your Honor, I'm going to approach the witness with 2358. Just for ease of this, Mr. Ottaway and I previously had an agreement that they were not going to be objecting to authenticity of business records of their own documents. I've given that to him. I need to just ask him if he has an objection. I guess I can lay a predicate if you need me to.
Trying to look and see what this document is, Joe. We have no objection to this document.
States 2358, the evidence.
So, ma'am, you take a second to look through this. We'll walk through it. We've got a couple of these longer documents to deal with today, and then we'll get to some shorter and easier ones. And as you look through it, I'll walk you through each page that we need to discuss. Ma'am, are you ready to turn to the first page?
Let me just get an overview.
Okay. Okay, ma'am, we're going to turn to page 8. Mike, that's 9.
Well, we have no objection to the document, Your Honor, being admitted in evidence. It would be nice to know if the witness has any personal knowledge of it.
I do not have personal knowledge of this document. It's the first time I've seen this document.
Good. We'll have a chance to go over it very well. And I love that Mr. Ottaway is asking questions for me. It helps. Are you ready?
It's cold, yes.
Ms. Dilsaver brings a blanket every day. I noticed you had one. It's not a bad idea, but
I think
I
it's,
like it.
I just have to get a thicker one, I think.
I'll pretend I didn't hear that.
At least somebody in this courtroom has to stay awake every day. So, all right, if we look at this, this is a 2001 business plan for the pain franchise in Duragesic. And I've asked you to turn to page 8, and we'll show it up here on the board. Fortunately, this document has a lot of simple graphs we can just look at. This is Janssen Pain franchise depiction of the long-acting opioid market. It uses TRX, that means total prescriptions, right?
That is correct.
And if you go to 1995 and you look at total prescriptions there, then it's 1839. You see that?
I see that.
And if we watch, as we go to your right along the timeline, each year total prescriptions do something, right?
Yes.
In 1997, you relaunched Duragesic for non-chronic cancer pain, and by then, prescriptions go up 3263, right?
I believe this is the long-acting opioid market in totality.
Yes, and that is in hundreds of thousands if you look at the axis on the left. So you see a growth rate that's gone up year over from 29% to 38%. You see that?
I see that.
And then the next year it grows another 37%. You see that?
I see that.
And by 1999, it grows 45%. You see that?
I see that, yes.
And the bar on the right is the first half of 2000, and it's more than half of the year before, right?
It appears to be, yes.
Okay, now if you'll turn to the next page, we look at that in terms of dollars for that market. Again, in billions. It shows a growth on an upward curve from 1995 to 1999. You can see it there with your own eyes.
I see that, yes.
And it goes up to 1.1 billion by 1999, correct?
I see that, yes.
And if you turn to the next page, it talks about patient potential and the way to grow the market. If you look at that on the lower part of it, third bullet from the bottom, it says big groups, arthritis and post-op pain are driven by geriatric population growth and increase in day surgeries, respectively. So one of your key markets was elder care, true?
So this is looking at the specific conditions.
Yes?
Arthritis and postoperative pain were conditions that resulted in moderate to severe pain, oftentimes in that geriatric population.
And elder care was a key market segment for your drugs.
Elder care, you mean the,
Nursing homes, long-term health facilities for elderly folks.
I wouldn't say it was primary, I would say that it was one of the areas that, because our drug was indicated for moderate to severe pain, and this was a condition in which that occurred.
And also here it looks at a growing market. Low back pain is endemic and increases with population growth. It says that, right?
It says that.
So low back pain was a targeted growth area for you.
Low back pain was an area that we saw as, again, because our drug was indicated for moderate to severe pain, and there was moderate to severe pain in that category. Yes.
So it was a targeted growth area. It was an area you were trying to grow for your business.
We weren't trying to grow low back pain. We felt that we could promote our drug in that specific area because there was chronic low back pain that was moderate to severely, there was pain medications needed for moderate to severe pain.
Right. You were trying to grow your market share by getting more drugs prescribed for low back pain.
Again, low back pain was an area where moderate to severe medications were needed.
So the answer is yes.
Well, I would put it in my words versus how you described it, so.
Now, if you'll turn to page 13, 14 for you, Mike. You have a part of this that says customer segments. You see that?
I see that, yes.
And if you'll turn to the next page, we'll look at how you define customers. When you're talking about the Janssen Pain franchise, you don't see patients there as a key customer segment, do you?
Well, I think there's 3 areas that you're looking at as far as customer segments.
Yes, ma'am. Let's go through them. I don't see patients on there. Do you?
Well, I would probably say consumers is patients.
Let's go through that. Prescribers, you see that?
I do.
So your key customer segment there is pain specialists, right?
Yes.
It has oncologists, and then beside that is what?
Primary care physicians.
Those primary care physicians, we see that, right?
Yes.
They were a major part of your targeted doctor audience, correct?
They were prescribers of the long-acting opioids at this time.
More than half of your market share was primary care physicians, right?
Again, primary care was they were a significant
And there you call them customers.
prescribers.
Now, we see another group of customers, and it's not patients, it's influencers, right?
It says that, yes.
So there's that word. It doesn't say educators, it says what?
It says influencers.
Influencers. You know, we heard yesterday, or the day before, that facts are stubborn things. It's also true that words matter. True?
It does, and I think the way this is being mentioned here is these are influencers on the prescribers. These are influencers that come into play for that medication.
Great. So, and we see consumers, caregivers, nurses, providers, pharmacists, payers, etc., right?
Correct.
And that stubborn word, influencer, is there. Mike, can we see the definition? I pulled up the definition from Merriam-Webster on influence. Influence, noun, the act or power of producing an effect without apparent force or direct authority. The power or capacity of causing an effect in indirect or intangible ways. Verb, to affect or alter by influence, sway, to have an effect on the condition or development of, modify. You see that?
I see that, yes.
Education appear in the definition of influence?
Excuse me, Your Honor, we've gone from a document she's never seen before and requiring to interpret that to Merriam-Webster's dictionary, and I'm sure we're headed back to the document at some point. It's unfair questioning to ask this witness to interpret a document she's never seen before using a dictionary.
I'll overrule the objection.
Thank you. And ma'am, you used the word educate when I referred to influence earlier. I'm showing you the definition of that, okay? So let's go back to the document. The last group there is payors. You see that?
I see that, yes.
Okay. So your customer listed by Jansen on this document are prescribers and influencers, right?
So again, I think we needed, prescribers are listed here as those that are prescribing the long-acting opioids. Influencers here are describing those individuals that actually influence, what I would suggest, influence the prescription or the prescribing of that drug. And then the payer is also influencing that prescription of the drug.
Okay.
So,
Fair enough. So your key customer segment, your customer includes those influencers who influence the prescribing of the drugs. That's what you just said.
that is listed as a key customer
Perfect. Okay, next
segment.
page. Now, we talked about primary care physicians. May I approach, Your Honor?
Yes, you may.
So that document we looked at just before, that was your KOLs were talking about the OxyContin problem and how there were so many primary care physicians in 2001 who were prescribing OxyContin. Remember that?
I do.
Okay, so here is your document. It's a little hard to read because it's old. But over here we have prescriptions by specialty in 2000. You see that?
I see that.
And on the left-hand side, we see Duragesic, and this big pie chart has primary care doctors, and what percentage is that?
63%.
Okay. And I believe the 16% is oncology. You see that over there? It's oncology and something else, a little hard for me to read.
I think oncology and hematology is 18%.
Okay. Pain management's only 3%, right?
Correct.
Now, if we go over to OxyContin, we see primary care at what percentage?
56%.
So at this time, you're actually 7% higher in the primary care physician slot than OxyContin was, right?
It says that, yes.
Okay, thank you. Now, if we turn to the next page. So there's that word influencers again, and we see a list of extensive list of potential influencers. It lists health organizations, nurses, home care providers, policymakers, and several others that you can see, right?
I see that, yes.
And then it talks about increasing focus on patients, families, and caregivers. And it lists COX-2 inhibitors, NSAIDs, and Tylenol, right?
It says that, yes.
Okay. So let's keep going through this document. On page 22, it's 23 for you, Mike. We see that your company lists the top 10 companies by long-acting and short-acting opioid sales, generic and brand. And we see there,
Can you tell me what page this is, please?
yes ma'am, it's 22 for you, the bottom right-hand corner.
I'm there.
Okay. You see there total company sales in 1999 for Purdue Frederick, $899,418,000 for all their products in the pain market. Do you see that?
I see that, yes.
Okay. And then you see Janssen total $2.082 billion. You see that?
I see that, yes.
And it's got $324,700,000 for Duragesic, right?
I see that, yes.
And then below that you have J&J, right?
I
And
see
it
that.
has $349,606,000 for Duragesic, Tylenol with codeine, and Tylox, correct?
I see that, yes.
And then below we have OMP, which is Ortho McNeil,
Yes.
$451 million
I see that, yes.
for Ultran, right?
I see that, yes.
Okay. And then we have other companies there, Endo, Watson, Mallinckrodt. Now, at this time, Noramco was supplying API to some of those companies, right?
Again, I'm not aware of the Ramco sales.
Now, if we go to page 24, bottom right-hand corner, we've got the competitive sales force profile. Now, you know that your sales force was really your most important asset in selling your products here in Oklahoma. True?
It was one of our assets, yes.
All right, and right there it says Janssen has 469 reps promoting pain, and all of those, they're broken down, but they're Duragesic, the first three, right?
I see that. I
Then
think
we see Partners OBI. What is OBI?
that would be Ortho Biotech.
That's a partner of Janssen.
It is a company of Janssen, yes.
Okay. And then OMP is Ortho McNeil, also a company of Janssen, right?
Yes.
And we see another 1,153 sales reps. And to the right, they are broken up between oncology, PCPs, and hospitals, right?
Correct.
930 of those are PCPs dedicated to the Ultran product, correct?
Yes. I think it's important, though, we need to look at the priority. These products are in priority 2, which means that there's another product in front of them that has the priority 1.
Okay. Now, if we look at Purdue Frederick there, they're listed. Purdue Frederick has 700 for OxyContin, right?
Yes.
And then Abbott has another 120 for OxyContin, right?
I see that, yes.
Okay. Just got a few more pages. We'll be done with this document. If we can go to page 27 for you. We see pain franchise outlook analysis, and on the left-hand side we see scenarios. You see that? And one of the things we see is increasing consumer empowerment, correct?
Yes.
Okay, and then connectivity and access to information increases, right?
I see that as one of the scenarios.
Now let's switch over to Beacon. This is your outlook analysis back in 2000. It says increased DTC, and for the benefit of the court, that means direct to consumer or direct to customer.
direct to consumer.
Okay. Advertising of medications. Says that. Y'all were doing that, right?
Not in this category. What this is a general term as far as increased DTC advertising of medications across the board.
So it wouldn't exclude this category. It would apply to all of them.
It's across the board.
And part of your pain franchise was Duragesic Noltram at that time, correct?
Yes.
Tylenol with codeine.
I don't know if that was marketed.
So it also says that consumers and physicians are increasingly internet savvy. Internet is marketing tool and e-detailing expands, right?
It says that, yes?
And then 2 down it says emergence of collaboration groups with increasing power, correct?
I see that.
Now if we go to the next one on franchise success imperative to your outlook, the
Yes.
bolded one at the top says leverage DTC opportunity, right?
I see that.
Okay. Now if we turn to the next page, we see a pain franchise gap analysis.
I see that, yes?
And we see on the far right, it says investment needed,
I see that.
increased sales force and brand resources. You see that?
I do.
And over on implication, it says unable to leverage the investment and presence in the pain market.
I see that.
Okay. Now, let's go to the next page. We're going to drive home how all this works together. Now, we see pain franchise SWOT analysis. You're a marketing person. Can you explain to the judge what SWOT means, please?
Strength, weakness, opportunity, and threat.
And what you did in what we need in marketing, or what you do in marketing, is you analyze strengths and weaknesses, opportunities and threats to your product, and you figure out how to deal with them in the marketplace, right?
So in any business, you would look at that, yes.
Okay, so one of the things we see on the bottom left is LTC elder care presence. That's a strength for you?
It says that, yes.
Okay, well, let's turn to the next page when we look at opportunities. It says large sustainable market growth, high unmet needs and target segments. You see that?
I see that, yes.
It goes on to say recognition of undertreatment of chronic pain. Now you heard me in opening statements talk about creating the need and selling the need. You remember that?
I heard you say that.
And that's a marketing deal. You create a need and then you market to that need. That's marketing 101.
So you don't necessarily create the need, you uncover what the unmet need is in the marketplace.
Well, if you uncover it, then you seek to exploit it.
If you uncover an unmet need, then you seek to address that unmet need with, in our case, the development of a medication that could meet that unmet need.
Well, and you also exploit it by marketing to it, telling people there's a problem and that you've got the solution.
I wouldn't use the word exploit. I would use the word you're bringing a medication to market that is meeting an unmet need. And so then you would educate the market on your product's benefits and risks associated with that need that the market has.
Right. So you have to get the market comfortable with the belief that you've got something it needs.
Well, you would educate the market on what the unmet need is, what they have brought forward as the unmet need, and then position your product.
Now look right below that. One of the opportunities you saw was a growing acceptance of opioid usage for non-malignant pain. Right? Now that suggests it wasn't always there.
It says that here.
Right. So you've got undertreatment of chronic pain as an opportunity and growing acceptance of opioids into non-malignant pain as an opportunity, right?
It says that here, yes.
Okay. Now, why did you need to gain acceptance of opioids in 2000, 2001?
Excuse me, Your Honor. Again, she hasn't seen the document. That's not what the document says.
I'm asking you a question.
You testified to your own knowledge.
Thank
Thank
you.
you. Sorry. What? why would anyone need to grow or gain acceptance of opioids for non-malignant pain?
Where does it say that?
Growing acceptance of opioid usage for non-malignant pain under opportunities, top left.
It's saying that the market itself, there's growing acceptance of opioid usage for non-malignant pain.
And I'm asking you, why in 2000 is the market acceptance growing?
Because even as, Dr. Portnoy said yesterday in his deposition, well, the recorded deposition that we looked at, there was an understanding of the need to treat moderate to severe pain and the recognition that in that moderate to severe pain, the use of opioids was becoming more acceptable because of the recognition of the undertreatment of pain.
Wasn't acceptable before 1996.
That I don't know. I wasn't back in that time frame in this marketplace, but
Janssen knew that prior to 1996 and the advent of Oxycontin for non-chronic cancer pain, and then your drug in 1997 launched that way, doctors were not comfortable prescribing Schedule II narcotics for everyday types of pain. It was cancer, palliative care, acute. Y'all expanded the marketplace to convince them that something that had not been okay was now okay.
Excuse me, Your Honor, that's not even a question, it's a speech.
Please rephrase it.
Y'all convinced them, thank you, Your Honor. Y'all convinced doctors over the 3 to 4 years prior to this document that it was okay to prescribe Schedule II narcotics for everyday chronic pain. Something that previous to that had not been the norm.
Objection, Your Honor. She's testified she didn't know what happened in this time frame. She's not a physician. She's looking at a document she's never seen before. Objection.
so Mr. Beckwith, what is your question?
Y'all marketed, influenced, educated to get acceptance of opioids by doctors to be used in a way that prior to 1996 and 97 had not been done.
Same objection, Your Honor, sorry.
Objection overruled.
Again, it sounds like you're telling me something. I don't know what your question is.
Judge Burge is helping me. Isn't that true?
I would not characterize it that way, no. And I don't agree with your term everyday pain. The pain that's associated with the use of opioids is considered moderate to severe pain. This is pain that is debilitating. So what this document is saying to me, and again, I've not seen this document before, but what it's saying to me is the market itself is starting to recognize the need to utilize opioids for this moderate to severe pain.
That market was one that you marketed to, correct?
We marketed in,
That you influenced,
we educated in,
that you influenced,
again,
that you,
Yes, answer sustained.
that you sent sales reps to,
we had sales representatives in the pain marketplace at this time,
that you,
yes.
that you sought to change
Sought to change what?
their prescribing behavior.
Our sales representatives went in and educated doctors around the benefits and risks of our medications.
Turn to page 34, please. On page 34, ma'am, it says key strategies for the pain franchise. The second one listed, drive duragesic business in key non-malignant segments. You see that?
I see that, yes?
And when I look up the definition of the word drive, it says to urge, push, or force onward, to set or keep in motion or operation, force, compel. That's what your marketing efforts, please let me finish, please. That's what your arguments, your marketing efforts sought to do.
Again, we have Mr. Beckworth testifying using a dictionary definition on a document the witness has never seen before Not asking her what her interpretation of it is, simply testifying about his.
I'll overrule the objection.
You sought to drive business in key non-malignant segments, right?
What I would say here is that the marketing is looking at these segments that we've talked about before, low back pain, one of them, osteoarthritis. Those are key areas that there are opportunities for growth. So that is where they're saying that one of the key strategies would be to focus on that potential business.
Your Honor, if I can hit 2 more pages, we'll be done with the document. You want to
Yes.
do that? Okay, thank you. Page 36, ma'am, right-hand corner. We see key initiatives and innovations for you. Let's look at some of the word choices. Increase, focus, internal and external resources against strategic targets. You see that?
I see that.
So we've got the word increase, correct?
Yes?
Resources
Yes?
against targets, right?
It says that, yes?
It says leverage consumer opportunity. You see that?
I see that, yes?
Coordinated aggressive L&A activities. You see that?
I see that, yes?
Down below it says something I'm really not sure what this means, but successfully reschedule Duragesic?
I don't know what that means.
I don't either. I mean, how could your company reschedule a Schedule II narcotic? How could you do that?
Your Honor, I object. Neither one of them know what they're talking about now.
And what I see, is my daughters are here, and sometimes they'll like to use air quotes with me. You literally, in this word here, have air quotes around the word reschedule, correct?
Those are actual quote marks, not air quotes, so I object to that.
They're air quotes. I mean, that word doesn't exist. You can't reschedule an FDA Schedule II narcotic. You can't do that.
Same objection, Your Honor. Neither one of these people knows what that word refers to. That's why it may be in quotes, but I don't know. Now we got all 3 of us who don't know.
Sustained.
Isn't it true, ma'am, that what was happening here is you knew for your key initiative to expand the market, you needed to go and reschedule that drug in the mind of doctors so that they thought it was safe and effective. You had to change and influence the marketplace. That's what that means.
Same objection, Your Honor. Both have testified they don't know what that means.
Before she answers, the microphone's rubbing up against your shoulder, interfering.
That's what that means.
Same objection, Your Honor.
Overruled.
Thank you.
I don't know what that means.
Last page, man. Page 38. I'm sorry, page 30. I don't have my glasses on. The last page, page 41. I apologize. I can't see those numbers. There's a summary of this document. Your pain franchise 2001 business plan. There at the bottom, it says need to build and protect their franchise, right?
It says that, yes?
Okay, thank you. Your Honor, we're done with this document. If I can continue if you'd like.
No, let's go ahead and right now, we'll start our afternoon session at 1:45. We'll invite the public to leave. I do want to ask the attorneys, we do need to make a record, so. So we want to have you come back at 1:30.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Okay. And that's not a public, that's not a closed proceeding. It's just, we'll start with the witness at 1:45. We'll do our making a record. at
Sure.
1:30.
Thank you.
Thank you.